So having joined the industry just before a pandemic, who knew what we were about to face? So I have to say there is no magic fairy dust in what I'm going to say today in terms of procurement strategies in the construction industry. It is probably, as it is for a lot of people in lots of different sectors, very diverse, and we have to think in a lot of different ways in an ever-changing world. So, not only am light's not working, but that text is really small. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of an introduction to Laing O'Rourke, talk a little bit about the context, and then try and address the question of how do we set up procurement strategies in this industry. So I'm not sure how many people know an awful lot about Laing O'Rourke, and I'm not here to do a sales pitch, but to try and explain the way in which Laing O'Rourke operates. It is a global organisation. The founder, Ray O'Rourke, is still our CEO, although we are transitioning to a new CEO. His son will be taking over from him fairly shortly. You can see it's quite a big order book that we've got going forward. Our last published accounts show the revenue that we achieved globally. And you can see how much we invest in R&D. You wouldn't necessarily associate construction with an engineering technology environment and R&D, but this is a business that tries to be at the forefront of innovation and does put a lot of our resources into finding safer and more efficient and high quality ways of working. The other key thing about Laing O'Rourke is that we like to directly employ. So again, as a head of procurement, we have to think about what we make and what we buy. We're trying to mitigate the risk of issues in the modern world, such as modern slavery. And by directly employing our staff, we can make sure that they have the right conditions for working in. So we have an organisation. I'm going to whisk through some of the images in terms of the projects that we deliver. But we have an organisation that is really set around modern methods of construction. We are looking to take as much away from the site as we can so that we have a safer environment and a higher quality output. So we are taking things into a factory environment so that we can get that precision engineering. Even though we make a lot of what we deliver, we still need the materials to deliver those outcomes. So again, similarly for a lot of heads of procurement in different industries, about 60 or 70% of what we do goes through supply chain. You may have heard about changes coming through construction, such as the Building Safety Act. And that is driving a lot of change in the industry around the provenance of the products and the competence of the people that are delivering the outcomes for construction. And that requires good record keeping enabled through a digital technology that can create those 3D images of our projects with the traceability to the products and the specifications. So, as I say, we like to make a lot of what we deliver and indirectly buy through those organisations. We have a facility up in Workshop, which is a vast factory that delivers some of the massive facades that you will see on some of the buildings. We have another facility that modularises some of the mechanical, electrical and plumbing and plant rooms for the projects that we build. If you look along the Thames, you'll probably be aware that the Victorian sewers are being updated at the moment. There is a massive sewage tunnel that is being installed under the Thames, and if you look on the surface, you'll see a lot of white cranes. They come from the plant equipment part of the business known as Select, so a lot of the plant that we use is our own equipment as well. And this is the scale of the facility that we have up in Worksop. This isn't something new. This has been going for over 10 years now. So it's a massive operation that enables us to, as I say, get that precision engineering in a controlled environment so that we can take away the vagaries of site in terms of weather and the conditions that people have to operate in. And some of the engineering projects, if you ever have the opportunity to go down to Hinkley Point and have a look at the vast site that is that nuclear plant, it's quite incredible in terms of the complex engineering that is going on down there. We also do a lot of rail projects as well. So when I talk about nuclear, people may be familiar with the Office of Nuclear Regulator. So it's very stringent assurance that goes on there. But similarly, rail is also high assurance. So when we're procuring, we need to make sure that we have all the controls and processes in place. We're able, through the facilities that we have, to take things away not only from construction sites, but from the everyday public environment. So we can bring in elements, and some people who may know the junction around the A3 and the M25, which is going through quite a bit of rework at the moment, we can install those bridges in minutes versus weeks, and we can stop lane closures and traffic disruption by doing that. So there'll be a number of images as I just click through quickly just to show the extent of the different types of projects that we work on. At the moment, we're building the new Everton Stadium again. So when we think about the procurement strategies, you know, these are one-off. These are unique things that we need to build up local supply chain for. This project particularly is known as the People's Project. So it is all about engaging with the local community. So heading up procurement in that environment, we need to be very sensitive and mindful to make sure that we do bring in all of our local supply chain. Lots of different customers, lots of different purposes for the projects that we deliver. So we have mixed use and residential, we have office space, we have heritage sites with whitelists, and over at Olympia, where we're trying to keep some of the heritage of the building. And actually in the case of Olympia, we're trying to keep it available to the public so that events can be run out of it whilst we're in the midst of some pretty heavy construction. So again, having a supply chain that understands all of that really does take some due diligence and careful consideration. Again, I'm just showing you a number of the different projects that we deliver across the geography of the UK and the Middle East and Australia. The ones which I'm sharing here are obviously based in the UK. We're starting to see a lot of work around hospitals and some of the university buildings out in Oxford. Again, trying to get supply chain in those areas isn't always very straightforward. A lot of our supply chain is London-based. But we do have a number of projects over in Oxford, so again, trying to build up a local supply chain in that area. Hospitals, obviously, you'll recall during COVID that construction workers were key workers. And so joining the construction industry in 2019, one of the first things I needed to do was to collaborate with my peer group across the industry to make available all of the personal protective equipment that key workers needed without disrupting the NHS supply chain. So that involved very careful collaboration that stayed within the laws around competition, so that we sourced PPE that had the right provenance but didn't disrupt the NHS. We were trying to deliver hospital beds to those that really needed them at the time. And this was one of the key ones that really made a difference at the time, because we managed to, during that period, actually get this hospital available sooner, just to make sure that we gave the NHS what they needed as quickly as possible. So as I say, you know, joining the industry in 2019 and we look at the global context of what's happened, we've had a pandemic, we're having a number of natural disasters at the moment, and every time something happens, you know, there's an awareness for all of us in procurement as to what are the long-term implications of that. Turkey is slow on the rebuild. You know, the tragedy in February of over 60,000 deaths in Syria and Turkey, we're still seeing them get back on their feet from that and try and rebuild the country. So it's that type of thing. We've recently seen some other natural disasters, and every time something like that happens, we know that there's a consequence and implication for our supply chain. We've obviously got the Ukraine war, and we all know the effect that that's had on us personally, but also for our supply chain in terms of the effect of energy and the materials that have a high dependency on energy. So we've seen some real hyper-escalation in the market during this time. And of course what we're all trying to do is to reduce carbon. So what we're finding, and again I'm sure it's true for a lot of the audience, is that there's a competition now around low carbon products. So whereas before we were trying to be a bit of a pathfinder and find some low carbon options around how to deliver concrete, which is a highly intense carbon material, a lot of other people are now pursuing those same options. That's a negative, but the positive is that that particular industry is really trying to invest and find better ways of delivering low carbon outcomes. And then in the UK, well, we all knew Brexit was coming, but that overlaid with COVID meant that a lot of our workforce were quarantined, and they were quarantined in their home country. So we have seen labour shortages as well. We still have labour shortages in the industry. We saw shortages previously in HGV drivers. Some of these things are coming back, but you know, the implications of changes in the tax around red diesel. So we moved to HVO because again, it's a low carbon alternative to diesel. But again, there's a cost associated with all of this. So there's a trade-off in procurement as to doing the right thing from a sustainability perspective, but the cost impacts in an industry that has very low margins and a hyper-escalation environment. And then specifically in construction, the tragedy of Grenfell has resulted in some legislation that is now published with the Building Safety Act. And as I said, this is around competency of people involved in the construction of buildings and the provenance of the information around the buildings and the products that we use. So all of this now is driving towards a better outcome for the industry. But we have to acknowledge that there is a cost associated with that. It's the right thing to do. We need to find our way through this in a way that we can still deliver the best outcomes for clients. And so, as I say, hyper-escalation, we're seeing insolvency within the sector, which is again putting a challenge on availability of the much needed skills and resources, and a challenge on the projects. You'll have seen over the weekend a lot in the press about HS2 and the affordability of HS2. So it is an ongoing challenge in terms of how to keep a supply chain engaged when there is doubt in the media over whether a project is going to go ahead. So the question for today is, so in amongst all of that, how do you create procurement strategy? I didn't go into ChatGPT, but it was tempting to see what that would define as a procurement strategy. The exam question for today, in the material that was published, is the statement from this conference at the top. But you can see, you know, it talks about cost. Cost is a massive driver. As I just said, HS2 will go on the basis of whether it's determined to be in the best public interest because of the cost of the project. But there are so many other things that we're trying to wrestle with now: safety, quality, sustainability, that it's just trying to find that right balance. The Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, for those that are involved in that organisation, provides a good reference point in terms of people's professional accreditation, but also the standards around the procurement processes that we use. And so, again, looking at what the definition is of procurement strategies there, you can see that, it talks about aligning to corporate strategies. That's a more holistic view about what it is that we're trying to deliver, rather than just a bottom line view. And I guess this is my definition of how I see procurement strategies. So, a procurement strategy has a number of different stakeholders that I want to think about in terms of the value proposition. Why would a supply chain want to work with Laing O'Rourke? How do we give them a great experience as a main contractor in the way that we go to work, in terms of the relationships that we have and the alignment that we have in terms of our technologies and capabilities? For the team, making sure that we have people that actually want to be part of a Laing O'Rourke procurement organisation, because they get a sense that they are doing something that is really purposeful and that they have a sense of value. So making sure that our strategists consider the right value statements for them. Our stakeholders, what is it that they're looking for in our procurement strategies? Obviously, they're looking for outcomes for the business. They want that market alignment. They want the economies of scale. They want the ability to leverage relationships. And they want certainty of outcome in the way that we set those strategies up, so that there is confidence for them that they can deliver the hospitals on time for the NHS and so on, or the nuclear power stations, or the rail infrastructure. And then obviously our clients, a value for money statement varies significantly, as I just went through each of those various images of all the different types of projects that we deliver. The value statement for each of those clients will differ. For some, it very much will be bottom line. It'll be speed of handover. They want to get their tenants in. They want to pass the benefit of the project on to the people that are going to be using and occupying it. For others, they will be invested in that project that building or infrastructure for the long term. So those value statements are very different. But they also are looking for us to keep them safe reputationally. They don't want us to let them down when it comes to issues around modern slavery or anything else that might be discovered through the media, because we haven't done our due diligence with supply chain. So we have to make sure that we protect our clients, ourselves, and our supply chain's interests in all of the due diligence that we do. And they're looking for reduced whole life costs as well. A lot of the clients that are holding on to the buildings are looking for something that is going to be enduring and a low cost in terms of maintenance and operation. And so this is my attempt at scribbling out. So therefore, I don't have a strategy in the organisation. We have, as the SIPS definition said, we have a corporate strategy. We need to align the strategies that we have to that. We have various sectors that we operate across, whether it's healthcare or nuclear, rail or mixed use. And then beneath each of those sectors we have projects, and each of those projects will need a specific procurement strategy. And then beneath the project strategy, we're going to have different package strategies as well. So lots and lots of different strategies, but there has to be some consistency in all of that. And that's how we have that centralised approach to some of the due diligence that we do, as I say, in terms of making sure that we're doing all the right things with our supply chain, that we can perhaps leverage in terms of the category procurement across the various projects. So it's a very complex environment, ever-changing. And as I said at the start of all of this, there is no magic fairy dust, one size fits all. It's a different day every day and never boring. So that was it from me. I don't know how quickly I raced through that, but I don't know if anybody had any questions at all. Yep.
Thank you, that was great. We are seeing from government departments that they're looking for help estimate. Hi, Liam Parker from Tilt Consulting. We're seeing in government frameworks a bit more of a focus on engaging SMEs in the Star 3 framework and other frameworks we've seen come out. Are you having to adapt as Langs to try and increase the SME usage, or do you have any advice on what to do?
So a very well-informed individual shared the stat with me once that over 90% of construction is micro. I think that's less than 10 people. It's, very, very small. So a massive number of our supply chain are SMEs. So no, not at all. It's all there because that's the nature of the industry. Having come from defence and aerospace, I understand the nature of the question because it would be quite different, but not in this industry. That is the world that we operate in.
Great. Thank you.
If that's all the questions, any more questions from anybody? Yes. Saves me running, thank you.
Cheers, thank you. Mendisi from Roslyn. So you had a lot of different strategies. Construction, there's a lot of micro, as you're mentioning there, in terms of projects as well. Given the vast amount of projects, from a data perspective, what are your sort of strategies for getting the visibility that you need on that sort of spend and keeping track of all of those and ensuring they align with that strategy?
It's not easy in this industry, I have to say. That the first chart that I showed, the margins are really small. The investment that we tend to put into the business, the R&D that we spend, tends to be externally rather than internally in our systems. We do invest in systems, but we are operating with systems that don't enable it in the way that perhaps other industries have some ERP type systems. So yes, we have those systems, but it is limited. So I would say that that's an area that we spend a lot of time on. We can see the information, it's not easy to get. So we can create the insights, we do have it, but it's not as easy as in other industries. But to invest in a whole new ERP, if anybody has ever done that before, it's a lengthy exercise and it's an expensive exercise as well. So we work with the information that we have to get us the insights that we have, but it's not an easy way to operate. As I say, I've come from the world of aerospace and it was very different in that respect.
Yeah, can we take one more question just on the far side there, please? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Similar kind of question really, given the granularity of your suppliers, the different types of project, the unique nature of some of these projects, how are you monitoring and pushing towards lower carbon methods of construction and use of materials as well?
So the technical team is designing on that basis. So I kind of would separate the question where I was thinking perhaps around the IT enablers versus the digital engineering, which will take in that calculation right at the outset in terms of how do we design carbon out, and we have some pretty good capabilities in that space to actually drive it out and to get a sense of where we're at. We do have a calculator within the business, but I suspect, looking at it from a supply chain lens, they would say that's true for a lot of main contractors. So I'm on the board of the Supply Chain Sustainability School, and we have a carbon calculator where we're trying to get a single source of truth so that we can capture some of that Scope 3 information one time for the industry, rather than each project or each contractor necessarily capturing this information. But it's probably true for lots of sectors. It's this big data question over carbon is one that we've still, as nationally, I would say, we've still got some challenges around. But we do, as I say, have the carbon calculators in our design tools at that stage to try and drive it down and reduce it.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Thank you for answering them in so much detail as well. Thank you again, Carol. Thank you.
Thank you.